You can't pinpoint when it began. It wasn't some huge disaster or a single heartbreak. It crept in quietly, like fog rolling under the door of your existence. At first, just a vague heaviness in your chest. Then the quiet moments between your thoughts began to stretch. The joy in things you used to love grew distant. People spoke, and you nodded, but inside you felt yourself vanishing.
You called it depression. That's the common label. But what if it's not? What if what you're going through isn't an ending, but a threshold? Carl Jung spent 6 years plumbing the depths of this same internal darkness. He didn't call it a breakdown. He called it a journey inward. And from that descent, he created his most mysterious, profound, and sacred work, the Red Book. He never meant for it to be seen while he was alive. It was filled with symbols, madness, dialogues with ancient forces, and above all, a message for people like you. You're not falling apart. You're waking up. This isn't some soft spiritual pep talk. It's a psychological reckoning. Because right now, you feel disconnected. Your passions are dull. You wake up drained. You can't explain what's wrong, even to yourself. You shed tears in the dark and wear a mask during the day. But here's the truth Jung uncovered. This darkness isn't always dysfunction. It can be the soul pulling back from a life it no longer sees as authentic. You're not broken. You're being summoned, drawn into the depths of your own unconscious. And like Jung, you're meant to walk through that internal chaos, not to escape it, but to emerge transformed. The Red Book wasn't a diary. It was a map of what happens when someone stops performing and starts facing the parts of themselves they've buried. Jung called it his confrontation with the unconscious. He saw visions, heard voices, met inner figures that shattered everything he thought he was. What he found wasn't insanity. It was raw truth. So here's the question you need to ask yourself. The question this entire message revolves around. What if the reason you feel empty is because your current self has nothing left to say? What if your pain isn't a glitch in your biology, but a rebellion of your spirit? What if the life you built, the titles, the routines, the expectations, was never truly yours? What if the mask is decaying and your soul is done pretending? This isn't failure. It's a mutiny of the spirit. Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. But not you, because if you've made it this far, something inside you already knows the suffering isn't random. It's a message, a whisper from within trying to get your attention." Let's paint a picture Jung would recognize. You're in a house. You've played roles in every room, smiled, made peace, fit in. But now you've quietly walked into the basement. It's dim, cold, silent. This is where most people panic. They run back upstairs to distractions, noise, normalcy. But if you stay, if you sit there long enough, something begins to stir. A voice from the shadows says, "I've been waiting for you." That voice is the real you, the self you buried to survive. The one who never wanted perfection, only wholeness. Jung didn't flee the basement. He stayed. He listened. He entered the storm. And no, he didn't find clarity immediately. He found confusion. He faced monsters. He stood face to face with madness. But through it all, he kept listening. And eventually, he found his soul. So what does this mean for you? Maybe you don't need to be medicated. Maybe you don't need to force a smile or shake it off. Maybe you're not meant to get better. Maybe you're meant to fall apart on purpose. Maybe you need to descend, to let your constructed identity unravel, to sit in the silence long enough for your true voice to return. That's the whole purpose of this message, to invert the story you've been sold about your suffering. You're not weak. You're not lazy. You're not broken beyond repair. You're being pulled, drawn inward by something older than your wounds, older than your culture, older than even your thoughts. You're being summoned by your unconscious. And if you're brave enough to answer the call, if you dare to go inward and stay, you won't return the same. But that's exactly the point. So let me ask you one more time. What if this darkness isn't a problem to fix, but a message you've spent your whole life running from? And what if that message is you? You think this pain is personal, that it's your failure, that you're the only one lost in this fog. But what if it's not an illness? What if it's an invitation? Carl Jung stepped through that door. He let go of his titles, his theories, his professional identity, and plunged into the unknown. The Red Book wasn't an escape. It was a conversation, a record of what he found when he stopped performing and started listening. In today's world, we've sterilized this process. We call it a disorder. We reduce it to chemical imbalances, buzzwords, self-care slogans. But Jung knew better. He said the true purpose of life is to ignite a light in the shadow of existence. He believed the soul retreats, not because it's broken, but because we've ignored it, smothered it with appearances, obligations, and the desperate need to keep things normal. So what did he do? He didn't fix his soul. He followed it into symbols, visions, myths, into the unknown. In the Red Book, Jung recorded surreal encounters, deserts, gods, towers, serpents. He called it the collective unconscious, a spiritual terrain older than culture, older than language. And he didn't just find chaos there. He found guidance. For instance, he met Philemon, a wise, dreamlike figure who guided him through the madness. Philemon wasn't real in the physical sense, but he was real psychologically. A part of Jung's own inner voice that only emerged once he went silent enough to hear it. Then there was the Red One, a force representing forbidden desires, destruction, and instinct. Jung didn't fight him. He listened, because these weren't hallucinations. They were parts of himself he'd buried, fragments of the psyche left behind. This is the truth most don't want to hear. What we call depression might actually be the arrival of truth. Truth about the empty relationships, the borrowed ambitions, the false selves we wear just to feel safe. And the soul? It begins to push back, but not with screams, with silence, with fatigue, with disinterest. That's the mind turning off the surface level because it needs you to go deeper. This is why Jung's work is still so vital. He didn't label the unconscious as dysfunction. He treated it like a hidden language of symbols, dreams, moods that don't make sense, and feelings that defy logic. He called this process initiation, a kind of psychic death. And like all deaths, it's messy. You lose drive. You lose certainty. You lose people. You even lose your identity. But in that space, something else stirs. Something that's real, unperformed, unapologetic. Let's be honest. Awakening doesn't look like sunshine and bliss. It looks like losing your grip. You might withdraw. You might sob for no reason. You might feel fury or guilt or nothing at all. You might feel like you're dying inside. And in a sense, you are. Because Jung said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. To become authentic is to give something up. To sacrifice being liked for being real. To let go of comfort in order to come alive. That pain you feel? It's the breaking of a false life. And society would rather you medicate it, ignore it, or bury it because a truly awakened soul can't be manipulated. Can't be sold a dream. It walks away from lies. It lives for truth. And that's what the Red Book was, a confrontation not just with symbols but with freedom. So if you feel like you're unraveling, if the mask is slipping, if you can't play along anymore, don't be afraid. You're not collapsing. You're awakening. And that pain you feel, that's your deeper self trying to push its way through a shell that no longer fits. You're not going backwards. You're stepping beyond the limits of a life too small to contain your soul. And yes, at first it feels like loss. You stop craving the things you once obsessed over. You stop laughing with the same people. Old rooms feel unfamiliar. The music you loved sounds hollow. Your goals crumble in your hands. You don't know who you are anymore. And that's terrifying. But it's also the beginning. Because Jung understood, the light isn't found by avoiding the dark. It's born by bringing the darkness into awareness. And that darkness is not outside you. It is you. The hidden, suppressed, neglected parts you locked away to fit in, to be accepted, to be safe. And when the soul starts to stir, everything changes. 1. Your relationships start to fall apart. Not loudly, quietly, as if the weight of pretense becomes too much. Conversations feel empty. You stop chasing. You stop being the emotional caretaker. You stop pretending. And others may call you distant. But really, you're just done wearing the mask. 2. You begin mourning the person you used to be. Yes, grief. Because the one who strived, pleased, obeyed, performed, they were masks. They protected you. But now, as you take them off, you feel hollow. That hollow space is sacred. It's where your true self begins to bloom. 3. You experience emotional chaos. Joy, rage, despair, numbness, clarity, one after the other. You think you're broken, but Jung would say you're healing. The unconscious brings everything up. Old wounds, repressed memories, fantasies you buried. They're rising not to destroy you, but to be seen. 4. You stop caring about approval. The applause, the likes, the validation, it doesn't fill you anymore. You speak honestly even when it's misunderstood. You no longer live for attention. You crave silence, solitude, and self-respect. 5. You become a mirror. Your presence unsettles people, not because you're cruel, but because your authenticity exposes their own hiding places. You speak gently and they feel judged. You set boundaries and they feel rejected. But you're no longer responsible for managing their reflection. Jung's awakening brought him to this same place. Alone, misunderstood, yet more whole than ever. Even his peers called him mad. But he couldn't go back. Once you've glimpsed your soul, pretending is impossible. Let's be honest, this phase can last weeks, months, even years. But you are not alone. You're not unraveling. You're becoming.